Okay, so here is the headline, and you tell me if you know what the hell this means. Okay, ready? Elliot Page, Juno star, shares transgender identity. Do you have any idea what that means? She can do whatever she wants. It is a free country. However, it being a free country, I am also free to point out that Ellen Page is, was, and shall remain a woman. Because Ellen Page is in fact a woman.
Well, all of this really began back in 2020, when the talented Canadian actor and producer Elliot Page made headlines by coming out as a trans man, asking everyone to recognize them as Elliot Page. You might remember Elliot from hit films like Juno or the popular Netflix show The Umbrella Academy. So as you can imagine, this announcement wasn't just another news flash, it was a huge deal, especially for people active in the woke community who really rallied behind it. But let's be honest, not everyone was exactly jumping for joy. There are still some folks who think the whole idea is totally wild and hard to wrap their heads around. So why did Elliot make this choice? What was the reasoning behind it all? Here's how they put it into their own words.
Do what I needed to and wanted to, and to, have the honor of that cover, which was shot by a trans man.
There's a lot to unpack here, but the essence is this. Elliot felt that transitioning was the way to finally embrace some deep sense of self-love and acceptance. Oh, and it's also because they could. It's just that simple. Some folks really would say that a typical woke thinking, doing what feels right without stressing over things like biology or so-called facts. But hey, don't just take my word for it. Ben Shapiro, who never misses a chance to weigh in on these kinds of topics, has plenty of fiery opinions on this whole thing. So let's just say he definitely didn't hold back.
Now, I'm happy to call Ellen Page Elliot if she wants to be called Elliot, because people change their names all the time, and you can, in fact, change your name by declaration. You cannot, however, change your sex by declaration or your gender by declaration. That is not how this works.
In Ben's opinion, it's more than just bizarre to think someone can suddenly flip their gender overnight. But what really blows his mind is the way everyone else is expected to simply nod along without a single question or a hint of doubt. Just like that, instant acceptance. But here's where things get a bit spicy. The moment you even hint at questioning this, like saying, wait a minute, you can't just decide to change your gender and expect everyone to immediately start calling you by a whole new name. The woke crowd fired right back, and suddenly you're the villain. They'll throw every label in the book at you, like you're the bad guy. And that's when Michael Knowles steps in with what he calls a truth bomb, as he puts it, and leaves everyone in stunned silence.
What about anorexics? What about people who are dangerously thin, but believe that they are fat? That's their truth.
It would be difficult to argue against a comparison such as that. The most important thing to remember is that just because one person has a belief about themselves, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone else must also believe it. In point of fact, there are situations in which agreeing with the beliefs of another person can actually be detrimental rather than beneficial. Take, for example, the following scenario. If someone is struggling with anorexia, someone who is dangerously thin insists that they are overweight, should we all just sit back, nod in agreement, and let them continue on that path, even if it puts their health at risk? It appears to be completely out of the ordinary. Today's standards of behavior in society appear to be completely off the rails. The question that Ben Shapiro wants to know is who he believes is to blame for all this craziness. The answer is going to blow your mind, I promise.
Standard, whereby if a person declares themselves a member of the opposite gender, the entire world, especially in the media, must immediately flip on a dime, stop calling them by the name everybody knew them as, and stop calling them by their biological.
To be fair, when you put it like that, it sounds like a bit much to expect the world to bend to your will like that.
You end up with complete nonsense, just complete bleh, coming out of the mouths of the media.
In Ben Shapiro's words, the media got its own wild agenda, pushing what he calls nonsense narratives that only add to the confusion out there, and he is definitely not okay with it. But when it comes to refusing to accept what he sees as the madness of Elliot Page's choice, Jordan Peterson is probably the most outspoken critic. After the actor made their big announcement, late-night host Seth Meyers had Elliot on his show, proudly introducing him as a transgender guest, making it a milestone for the series. Well, Peterson wasn't about to let that pass without comment. He responded with a post that was so controversial that it almost caused the internet to crash. Remember when pride was a sin and Ellen Page just had breasts removed by a criminal physician? In just that one post, Peterson openly disregarded Elliott's transition by referring to him with female pronouns. This was done on purpose. Unsurprisingly, this caused the awakened crowd to explode into a full-blown rage, and the response was extremely harsh. However, Peterson remained completely unfazed and steadfast in his commitment to his words, regardless of the storm that was raging in his direction. In addition, Jordan provided a little bit more information in his defense of his post so that people could better comprehend where he was coming from.
Not everything legal isn't criminal. And do they have that right? See, I would have left Ellen Page alone if she hadn't been parading her new abs in a fashion magazine.
For starters, Jordan Peterson's main point here is pretty striking. Just because something's legal doesn't mean it's not criminal. In his eyes, letting people transition and change their genders isn't just a bad idea. It's flat out wrong, something that borders on criminal and shouldn't be accepted. But what seems to bug him even more is seeing Elliott proudly presenting as a man on magazine covers. To Jordan, this kind of visibility has a strong influence, especially on young, impressionable minds, and he sees that as a massive issue, one he's definitely not holding back from calling out. But why is Peterson so strongly opposed to the idea of transitioning?
So I thought, oh, well, what's going to happen is we'll produce a psychogenic epidemic of gender dysphoria among adolescent females. And that is exactly what's happened.
It is a full-blown epidemic, according to him, and the fact the general public is being fed conflicting messages is the root cause of the problem. According to him, once this confusion takes hold, it spreads like wildfire, affecting those who are most susceptible to being influenced by it. In light of this, Michael Knowles, who considers himself to be a truth-teller, does not sugarcoat the situation either. He dives right in, not only to completely dismantle the concept of Elliott's transition, but also to question the very idea of gender dysphoria and transitioning. He does this by tearing each and every aspect of the idea apart. In order to prove his point, he goes all the way back to Johns Hopkins University, which he considers to be the origin of this shift.
As a little baby, mutilated the boy's genitals to make him look more like a girl and conducted heinous experiments on him, and both he and his brother developed horrible disorders and ultimately both killed themselves on the altar, sacrificed on the altar.
Peterson argues that transitioning doesn't actually help anyone in a meaningful way, and anyone who says otherwise is, in his words, just spouting nonsense. Another doctor over at Johns Hopkins came to a similar conclusion, eventually deciding to stop performing sex change surgeries altogether.
Ideology. This is what he concluded in the 70s. He said, the surgery doesn't really do anything to help people. It doesn't necessarily hurt, but it doesn't, as a psychological matter, it obviously hurts their physicality, but it doesn't help them, so he stopped doing it.
But let's just get back to how baffling this whole gender topic can be. Ben Shapiro highlighted a major, even more conflicting detail in Elliott's announcement that got people scratching their heads.
But she also declared that she is a queer man. Now, this is confusing, because if she were a queer man, this would mean that she is attracted to men, which would technically mean that she's a straight woman, right?
Do any of these ideas really make sense to you? This level of confusion here is almost unbelievable. But wait, Ben Shapiro has actually put some thought into this with a very open mind.
Attracted to men, this would make her a straight woman, but we know she's not that because she was a lesbian, right? So she is married to a woman, as far as I'm aware, and that means that she is a lesbian.
Sadly, the woke crowd seems to be swept up in all these new ideologies and hard-to-grasp narratives.
But now she is a man, and according to her, this means that she is a white, straight male. So how's she queer? She's a white, straight male.
Unfortunately, if you're not ready to accept whatever these woke folks say, and if you don't fall in line with these beliefs, no matter how crazy it may sound, you'd be running some serious risk of being canceled. Jordan Peterson knows all about that after his controversial post about Elliot Page. Despite the intense backlash, he didn't budge from his stance, like when he was asked if he'd apologized yet. Peterson, firmly and without regret, continued to refer to Page by her former name, what the woke crowd calls dead naming. This led to his account on X being suspended. And how did he feel about that? Peterson was quoted saying, "I've essentially been banned from Twitter. I say banned, but technically I'm suspended, and the suspension won't be lifted until I delete the so-called hateful tweet. But I'd rather die than do that." In his view, the urge to change one's gender usually stems from temperament rather than necessity.
There's a consulting group in the UK now that's claiming there's 150 different genders. There's actually, I suppose, 7 billion different genders if you want to get technical about it, because everybody's temperament differs.
Since temperament varies from person to person, Peterson suggests that if gender were based purely on temperament, they'd need to be as many genders as there are people on the planet, around 8 billion. Do you agree with Peterson's take on this? And what are your thoughts on Elliott's story? Share what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this.